Welcome to the Seth Loves to Talk show. This is the very first episode of the podcast where I, Seth Krantzler, talk with my lovely friends. And I've got a wonderful guest today, my friend Kaevon, aka DJ Burrito Boy.
Hello.
Here to tell us about American fast food in Iran. Now, you told me about this, and I was very excited by it. And it made me really want to do this podcast because for me, I love to talk, but what I love more is being passionate about things. And you came to me and said, this is something that I could do, Seth Loves to Talk about. I could just go on and on about this. And I went, I have no idea what this is, but this sounds really interesting. And I love that you're excited about it. And I want to give you a platform for it. So that's what this podcast is going to be in general, is having people on that are the experts, that they love, you know, whatever it is that they love. And they're here to talk about it with me so I can ask questions and learn more about it. So without any further ado, Kaevon, take it away. What is this, man?
Hell yeah. First off, I'm going to correct you and say, we don't say Iran, it's Iran. There's, hack comedians have made endless amounts of jokes about that. But, basically like the foundation of this, where this came to my brain is like, I've had conversations with friends about this, like, at least 10 times over the last 5 years of my life or so. There's an article by a blog called Atlas Obscura that kind of talks about it. And I swear to God, I remember seeing a picture in this article of a knockoff KFC in Iran that I for sure have been to. And I was like, this is a weird, kind of, perfect amalgamation of weird America, lowbrow, highbrow, mashup cultural stuff, plus the thing that people from small countries get, where they're just whenever anyone mentions their country, they get super stoked. That's kind of what that is too. They're like, oh, they know what Iran is. They know about this weird niche, phenomenon in Iran. That's what I think is cool about it. So, I feel
when you say knockoff, what do you actually mean by knockoff? Is it Kentucky spelled wrong? You know what I mean?
Right. There's one of them is called Kentucky House. One of them is called KFC. But just the basic of the situation is, the relationship between the United States and Iran is so bad to the point where American fast food companies who are dying to expand to everywhere on the planet that will take them will not go to Iran. There are sanctions, United States sanctions, that prevent certain businesses from selling stuff to Iran or doing certain things. I don't know if they specifically prohibit fast food companies from expanding into Iran. They actually might. I seriously, there's all sorts of shit that they prohibit that you wouldn't expect, but it's so bad that not only can they not open their restaurants in Iran, they can't enforce their copyright there either. And kind of why would they waste all the time and money going through Iran's court system to sue Kentucky House when they're not going to open a KFC there anyway. So there's a place where there is a demand for Americanized fast food, but there's no market for it. So just a bunch of shit has popped up in its place. And it's really funny to see just the weird knockoffs of some of the examples is, there's a Subway knockoff called Subways. There are Pizza Hut knockoffs. One is called Pizza Hat. Another is called Pizza Hut. There's a burger place called Boof Burger. So there's
Boof Burger?
Boof Burger. Yeah. There's all sorts of weird shit. There's when I was a kid, I feel bad about this because I feel like my parents and my uncles and aunts probably thought I was making fun of them, but I used to think that the Persian accent, it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. And sometimes my sister and I would talk to each other in fake Persian accents, and they have English writing of in these Persian fake knockoff Burger Kings, they'll have the article mentions that they call it the double down instead of the double down, and they have it spelled DAHBEL, double instead of double, just shit like that is it kills me, I think it's so funny because I've heard plenty of it's close to home. It's what my family sounds like when they're trying to say words and getting it wrong, and it's kind of charming and funny and stuff. So that's what I don't want to ramble endlessly, but I guess this is
please.
This is the Kaevon Loves to Talk show. So
yeah. So my question about it is, like how knockoff is knockoff, because one, you mentioned how, that there's not really like a clear avenue for what these companies would do in terms of disputing their copyright and things like that. That was the first question that Devin, my girlfriend, said, was why do these exist? Like, why does KFC let this happen? And it's like, it's worse PR to say that you're going after Iranian KFC to protect your copyright. If you're like, there's not a reason to do that. It's just bad PR, basically, especially if you're not going to open the store yourself.
They also just can't. Like, there's like, there have been like many, not to make like light of like the serious like diplomatic situation, but there have been like American journalists who go to Iran and just disappear, So
sure,
I can't imagine that they'd get a lot of support from like Iranian courts being like, we want to protect our IP, and they're like, fuck you. Like, there's 50% youth unemployment right now. Like, our country's starving. Fuck you.
Yeah, there's definitely not a clear reason for Iran to do anything about it. With that being said, how similar, as someone who has never seen any pictures, any information, like, is KFC literally KFC? Is it that it's not called Kentucky Fried Chicken, it's just called KFC? Is it red? Does it have the Colonel? Are there, like, when it goes to copying these American restaurants, how similar is it with the branding and stuff like that? Is it just name recognition? Are they copying brand assets? Does Subway have footlongs? You know what I mean?
I'm glad you asked, Seth. So, I'll send you like this article if I haven't already, so that you can just straight up use pictures of it. I won't try to show it to the Twitch screen, but like, so it's all over the place. There's a wide range from just like, we are lightly taking inspiration from the McDonald's arches to like, we are trying to make this look like as true to the American version as possible. So I remember like one of my memories I've been to Iran 3 times, and one of my memories from my youngest time was like, I don't know why this happened so late, but it wasn't until I was like probably like in 3rd or 4th grade that I discovered what In-N-Out was. I grew up in California, but I just had never been until I was like 10 or 11. And like,
I think you're like the only Californian that didn't discover what In-N-Out was at birth.
Yeah, I mean, I did move to California when I was 3, so I'm kind of a fake Californian. I'm kind of an out-of-stater.
Wow, for real.
Yeah. But I remember seeing the In-N-Out logo in Iran, and I was like kind of confused. I was like, I didn't understand that, like,
these aren't even in New York. They're over
here.
Right,
yeah. But also, I was a little kid, and I didn't know shit about geography. I didn't know anything about politics.
Sure.
Like, I remember, part of the reason why I think this stuff is so funny is because, like, it's like try to imagine like when you are a little kid, if you happen to like be born in the West, in like America or Canada, and if you've had the good fortune of like ever being able to like travel internationally, especially to a place that's radically different than where you're from. Like, I remember being like 10 or 11 and like like blowing my mind that like not the whole world was not the US, other people have completely different lives. Like the way that they talk is different, the things that they eat are different, the schools that they go to are different. Just every little thing about life is completely different. And then to just see like this thing that reminds you exactly of home, like after all of that, is like the weirdest mind fuck. And especially as a little kid, I didn't know whether to be like proud or ashamed of America, that like our cultural export that is the most pervasive there is like fast food, people there definitely see it differently than we do. To get back to your question though, so there's all sorts of shit like that In-N-Out sign. That was just
just 1 for 1.
It was a 1 for 1. Like, the sign was exactly the same. I didn't eat at the store, but I guarantee you, like, you know how Americans have like, they say that Panda Express is like, I'm sure this is like a conversation every middle schooler has. Panda Express isn't real Chinese food. It's Americanized Chinese food. And then they're like, what? And then the kids are like, what? Like, that's exactly, they take American foods, but then they Persianize it. Like, I remember going to a burger place, and like the main, if I were to think of like, if somebody says Persian food, the first image that pops into my brain is like a big beef kebab with over like a mound of rice. Like, this burger was like, if you took the beef kebab off of that plate and put it in between 2 burger buns and squirted some ketchup on it, like that's what it tasted like. I was like, this is not. It was like a McDonald's knockoff, but it didn't taste like McDonald's at all. It didn't have any of that like kind of vinegary, salty, like, but also super plain flavor with like the worst grade of meat possible, you know, like it tasted like a kebab and stuff. And so
there are local, it's not just American fast food. It's American fast food for the cultural impact, but not necessarily the culinary impact.
Right.
It's not like, oh yeah, we found a way to do fresh, never frozen hamburgers. It's more like, okay, we can actually deliver localized food in an American style for a Persian audience, basically.
Yeah. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, like, what people want as far as, like, products you're going to integrate into your everyday life, like, you want the illusion of, like, what's the word that I'm thinking of? Like exoticism. Like, you want the illusion of, like, oh, this is foreign and cool and, like, different and elevated.
I was going to say class, but that's really not an accurate way to describe fast food as class. But exoticism, I think, is a good word for it. Like, it's just the idea of, yeah, this is a way that we can have something foreign, but also have it, we can offer that experience of giving someone a foreign import, but it is just the same thing we would usually make if we were running a kebab stand.
Yeah, I'm drawing a lot on my memory of conversations with my cousins, but I consulted specifically my cousin Parsa like an hour ago. And had him send me some text about like his experience with that stuff because he moved to the U.S. from Iran when he was like 18, right? And so something that one of my cousins told me was that like KFC is so like fake KFC is so popular and ubiquitous in Iran that like they don't, rather than say fried chicken, they say like Kentucky, like that's how they say fried chicken. Because that wasn't a food in Iran before these KFCs rolled through. I suppose that's conjecture on my part, but then and then another thing was that like you were asking like how close are they? Like the KFC was like, when I visited a KFC in Shiraz, which is one of Iran's, it's like the second biggest city, I think. This was when I was like 22, and I was like, Mom, you're taking me to a KFC. Like, I need to see this shit. Like, I made her like budget out time in our like 2 weeks to go do this. Like, I would have believed it was real. Like, if I didn't know better, it was perfect. They had the fucking like the wall. You know how like a lot of new fast food buildings are that kind of shitty industrial gray with like they look like sleek and modern, but they're also kind of soul crushing and shitty.
They're like the equivalent of like a linoleum floor where it's like it's got a pattern on it that makes it look nice, but in the reality it's just cheap plastic.
Yeah. It's like it looks like a brand new apartment development that was like it has no soul to it or anything like that. Like that's like that was the architecture, which was spot on, accurate, right? So you could tell it was new. And then number 2, like all of like the decals on the walls, the dude, like they were playing like a Persian like minor league baseball game, which was like not even a thing like on the TV in the restaurant, which I didn't even know existed. It looked very small. There was no audience, and it looked like it was like a high school baseball diamond. Like it wasn't like So that's how you know. And then my favorite, like the absolute part of it was like there was a picture of Colonel Sanders on the wall with like a wall mural of like his life, like the stories of his life, like written out in Farsi, which was really funny. I can't read Farsi very well, but I picked up enough through just context clues to be able to like.
That's so funny.
Yeah, and then and I will send you these. I took pictures of them, I assume doctored photos of like Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo like holding buckets of chicken and like advertising the fake KFC.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I love that.
Which is so like they look really good. Again, it was like if I was a little kid, like me as an adult, it's like I know like okay, Ronaldo's not endorsing Iranian KFC, but like if I was a kid, I would have believed it for sure. That's number 1. And then like just the fact that they went through all that effort to like it looks perfect and good, but it also is like exactly what they would like. Like they wouldn't want to see like, I mean maybe they would, like I feel like Persians kind of like the NBA, or at least my family does, but like they wouldn't give a shit if it was like Tom Brady holding a bucket of chicken, like,
yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's like, of course. It's their stars.
It's localized for the area. I mean, It makes a lot of sense that if you're going to promote your Fugazi KFC, you would get the two biggest international athletes in the world.
Yeah.
Definitely makes sense.
Yeah, and they the cool thing about it, that like the texture and stuff, like it was obviously fried chicken. Like fried chicken's not like the hardest thing in the world to make. The taste was completely different though. Like the blend of spices, the things that I tasted immediately, even with my like, I didn't really know how to cook back then that well, but I could taste turmeric and I could taste cumin. Like they just take like two, spices that like play well with Middle Eastern cuisine and just throw it in there.
Yeah, of course.
Like there you go.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. I would be shocked if they were using the, secret, whatever it is, 11 herbs and spices or whatever.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if that was really the thing after, going through all this effort just to make American fried chicken and not make it Persian fried chicken,
right. I mean, also, they don't have access to that proprietary information, They don't know.
Well,
they don't know what the 11 herbs and spices are.
It's interesting because it makes me wonder if Persian fried chicken would be as successful. Right? Like if there was that equivalent, like of localized, like if we think of Kentucky Fried Chicken, like that's just a state's version of fried chicken. Like it would be interesting if there was Shiraz fried chicken or Persian fried chicken, whatever you want. That
are you
is
saying
just
in
the
Iran?
exact same thing. I guess what I'm saying is that it's funny that they go to the American version, which is so ubiquitous, like culturally. But at the same time, it's probably going to do better doing a fake Kentucky Fried Chicken than if you do Shiraz Fried Chicken, right? Like there's probably 1,000 places that are Shiraz Fried Chicken, but if you're the best fake KFC, you are like an oddity, a landmark almost, some sort of interesting thing.
I mean, and here's the thing, right? Just for, context, background for your viewers and stuff. Like, I was born in the States. I have a parent who's an American, a mom was born in Iran. So, like, I'm no authority on what immigrants think or whatever. This is just my secondhand perspective or whatever. But, like, I hear plenty of people who grew up in other countries tell me that, like, they view American stuff as cool. Like, I saw, like, an article about, like, they're, like, people in, I forget where in Asia, but like there's like somewhere in Asia with like a Costco, and like people will like take do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't, but as someone who's in Seattle, Kirkland, Washington, like Costco is such a thing here. And it was a thing back when I was in Connecticut. I remember there was a Costco that we would go to like in Norwalk, and it was a big deal that, Costco had opened up and we were really excited, and we'd get soft serve. We'd do the whole thing. We'd get hot dogs for $1 or whatever. Yeah. And it's so funny now that I'm in Seattle because Costco here is like an even bigger deal. Like when a storm hits, when it's Christmas, whatever weekend, like Costco parking lots are crazy. It's absolutely insane.
Dude, this Costco in Asia, I don't remember. It might have even been just like a storefront. It's like the Costco is like the place that like, like Asian people go to take photos of themselves wearing like crop tops and skinny jeans and like cosplay as Americans. Like they like go to Costco and take pictures outside of it to be like, we're American influencers. Like that's like the thing. It's like I mean, sure, Costco is a staple here, but people don't think of it as like cool. You're
not seeing people take Instagrams in front of the Costco or like in front of the soft serve section.
Right. I mean, that's what my mom told me growing up was that just like, any American musician was just cool because they were an American musician in Iran. And, another thing is that like, especially in more recent years, that like this stuff has been partially banned, right? Like the relationship between Iran and the U.S. is openly hostile. So like, I do want to give I don't want to make this like a history podcast, but I do want to give your listeners
I want this context because this was something that for me, I was really interested in hearing your perspective on it. As someone with parents and family, all who have left Iran for the most part. Now you still have family that is in Iran, right? Yeah. But it is funny to me that you have this interesting perspective of kind of a very unique side of the like diaspora that kind of happened, like I think starting in the 70s, right? We were kind of chatting about it a bit. 99% of my knowledge about Iran comes from Persepolis and reading Persepolis in high school. Shout out to Jenny Balzer. But I loved Persepolis, and but before we get the full history lesson, the thing that has stuck in my head the most from Persepolis is there's a part where she's talking about getting a some sort of CD or music player. It might have been a tape player, I think. She was walking through a marketplace and someone was selling Jekyll Maxon, and it was Jekyll Maxon tapes, and I thought it was really funny, but that I think really like kind of hammers in that point of like anything American is cool. It was like the coolest thing you could get was like a bootleg American cassette tape of Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
So yeah, so go into a bit of that history, because you had a really interesting perspective when we were chatting a bit about it before.
Yeah. There's two like major, years that I think are super consequential. 1953 and 1979 were two like revolutionary government change years that my mom came here. Sometimes when my mom tells me stories, I suspect they might be a little punched up. She told me that she was on the last flight before the revolution, like that left Iran to go to the States. Maybe it was the last like week. I don't know. But, my mom like left here after the revolution and then never came back. So, like a lot of people who like have family who leave during like a pseudo diaspora event, like I only hear bad things about the new government and good things about the old government. And then with the older I get, the more I hear from other people. Like I learn that there's other perspectives out there. So 1953, Iran is a small Middle Eastern country that is, I think it's important to know, is like pretty like ethnically distinct from the rest of the countries in the Middle East, because they're one of the few like non-Arab countries, right? Iran has like a distinct national ethnic identity. They have a lot of like pride from like the Persian Empire and stuff. In 1953, there were kind of two like parallel governments, kind of like what you have in the UK, where there's like a a democratically elected parliament type thing, and then there's like a monarch that's kind of a figurehead. In the early 50s, the democratically elected president, or I don't know the exact title for him, tried to nationalize the oil in Iran. Like the oil, I think it was called the Anglo-American Oil Company, and it eventually morphed into what is now known as BP. But if I'm remembering that correctly, I might not be. I'm not a historian. But so after Iran tried to nationalize their oil industry, the CIA and the British equivalent of the CIA endorsed like a coup that overthrew the democratically elected government and then installed the Shah as like the king. Shah means king in Farsi, as like the real leader of Iran. The Shah was very open to the West, but he was also a very corrupt government where wealth inequality was super bad. So like my family was relatively wealthy between the 50s and the 70s. So like the story I was told growing up was like, it was perfect. Iran was great. It was super liberal and American, and you can wear like short skirts and dance to like, soul music and stuff. And like Iran was great. But I think people really resented that the most of the wealth in the country was held by American business interests and not by ordinary citizens. And so there was kind of like a popular sentiment, anti-government sentiment. There was also like the Shah had like a secret police where people would like they would like disappear people who had like spoke out against the government and stuff. So it was like a truly dangerous place for a lot of Iranians and not a good living situation. The leader that all of that kind of like revolutionary anger coalesced around was a Islamic fundamentalist. He was a super right-wing Ayatollah Khomeini, and when he took over after the Iranian Revolution, and Iran took a lot of steps to become more independent and more in control of their own destiny. They also became very hardline conservatives and fundamentalist Islamic conservatives, where it's just very weird to have I can't imagine what it would be like to be like, okay, you have like, I don't want to oversell how like equal Iran was in the 60s and 70s and stuff, but you go from not like Islamic law to Islamic law, and it's a big change. And there is the article that I was mentioning to you in Atlas Obscura mentions like they had a word that was like Western toxification, like anything that was like overtly Western was banned, and so you have this weird kind of like double thing where like, number one, like anytime you have like a crackdown religious society, there's going to be like youthful rebellion against it, right? And there's going to be people who like, just how in the United States in like the 40s and 50s when like we were a lot more overtly Christian and evangelical. Like people wanted to listen to like Elvis and shit and like watch him gyrate his hips. Like there's gonna be like Persians in the 80s who want to listen to Judas Priest or whatever and like, you know, enjoy that stuff. And I think that there's a really funny quote I was killing me from you know, when the Trump administration assassinated Soleimani, who's like an Iranian general who like modern day is like one of their national heroes. One of their clerics was quoted saying something in the news in Iranian state media that was like, you know, like we couldn't even retaliate against the United States if we wanted to, because there's no real person that Americans like revere as much as we revere Soleimani. Like
Sure.
They only have fictional heroes and we can't bomb SpongeBob and Spider-Man, you know? like that is like their vision
Damn
of the
straight.
United States is like our cultural exports above all else, right?
Yeah,
and so
sure.
like the way that this article frames it is that, you know, because obviously I wasn't alive in the 80s in Iran, was that like they could and they did ban Western music. They could and they did ban Western television, even as recently as like when I was in Iran last. I don't know what the status is on this stuff now. I hear they're like starting to slightly open up again, but like Iranian people couldn't access like Western news, like they couldn't get on Twitter. Like it's very easy and like common for people to get on like VPNs and access whatever American internet, whatever Western internet they wanted to, and people did that, and that's how a lot of communications happen. That's how that like there's a reason why like a bunch of people, like people from the Middle East, communicate with WhatsApp, you know, because it's encrypted.
Yeah, sure.
But like that's the kind of thing where like, you know, I don't want to make it sound like everyone in Iran is like dying for American culture to come in, and they don't.
Yeah, of course. There's plenty of people
stuff
that are probably still very against the idea of there being a KFC and stuff like that.
Right, and like I can only imagine like if I was, you know, just knowing me and my political beliefs, if I was an Iranian in the 1950s, I would have wanted to nationalize the oil industry. You know, I wouldn't have wanted like all of the wealth to be held by a massive foreign power. So like I can understand the resentment toward American involvement in Iranian daily life, but also like it's difficult to just control culture from the top down. And so, you know, that's like a detail in the article that we read, that I like reread before this, and then my cousin Parsa told me almost the exact same thing, was that like, you know, even if there was nowhere, like my cousin Parsa told me like when you were, you know, his parents' age, like our parents' age, you couldn't go on the internet and like you couldn't download a VPN and go on the internet and watch like the NBA or like listen to like, you know, Kanye West or Drake or whatever. But like what people did,
it was inaccessible in comparison by now.
Right. Like what people did do, like there were like bootleg tapes and stuff. There's even like bootleg radio stations, but it's harder to get and it's easier to ban. But people in Iran travel to Dubai a lot, and American companies and like chains are in Dubai. So like Iranians go to Dubai, try their first Burger King, and they're like, this is cool. And like not only is it cool, it's also like convenient and fast. And like something that I can personally attest to in Persian culture is like, oh my God, dude, social engagements drag on for fucking ever. Like, you know,
Sure.
my mom will tell me that we're just going to stop by for tea really quick and we'll be in and out in 20 minutes. And then like 4 hours later, I'm still there, like talking to this person's kids or whatever. Like it's like that shit is like, I can't tell you the number of times when I was a kid and I'd be playing like Smash or something at my friend's house, and then my mom would come. If our parents were both Persian and our mom started talking, I'd be like, okay, we have at least an hour and a half. Like, let's keep playing.
Yeah.
You know?
I relate to that as a Jew. Like,
yeah.
I feel like that happened to me all the time, where like my mom would come over to like my friends' places where we'd be like playing and hanging out, and it would be like, okay, cool, like we've got an hour now. Like my mom just showed up, so it's like, you know. Maybe that was just a function of, you know, I'm a very extroverted person. Both my parents are very extroverted.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, I definitely got that from them. And so maybe that's just a function of them meeting their friends, basically. You know, when I was at least a little kid, a lot of my friends were just people that my parents were friends with, and they liked them.
Sure. Yeah.
So, you know, you're over at their house to hang out and all that.
Right.
It was time for them to catch up as well. So, you know, we were talking about taking photos in front of Costco earlier, and I was thinking about how Uniqlo is like a pretty similar experience, I think, where it's like, I love shopping at Uniqlo, but like I could totally see people like taking photos in front of a Uniqlo and like the signs. And even if that's just like the Gap and like you wouldn't do that. No offense to to the Gap. I don't, they have improved their image a bit in the last few years, but like you wouldn't be doing that in front of the Gap. And it's like everyone always marketed Uniqlo to me as like, oh, it's Japanese Gap. Like that's the equivalent. And it's like, I don't know, when you were a kid, you weren't like, let's go to Gap. Like,
right,
Old Navy. Like,
Another thing
that's
is
not
like,
what you were interested in.
It's not just the product itself, it's like the experience associated with the product, where like, Americans love like convenience above all else, and like that is what fast food offers to you. And that, at least in my personal experience, again, like I'm not an expert on Persian cuisine or whatever, but like when you think Persian restaurant, you're thinking like a massive sit down dinner that's going to take you like at least an hour and a half, like for people to like grab shit and go is like probably huge. And so that's like cool, but I don't know, like that's what this is, me like speculating about why I think Iranians think it's cool. The reason I think it's cool is because it's just like, you ever see like some graffiti that's like a knockoff of like, graffiti. I was thinking about like graffiti of like Bart Simpson smoking weed or whatever. It's like,
sure. Yeah,
like shit that is a little bit beyond the pale, that it's like these familiar kind of like glossy corporate images, like the McDonald's arch. Like it is like impressive and like a essential feature of fast food that like is the same everywhere you go. So just to see a McDonald's like spelled wrong, you're just kind of like, we like as Americans, we've been conditioned to see these things over and over and over again and expect a certain thing. Like it's to a point that's unavoidable. And so when you see it, like when you see the world that you're expecting fucked with in a small way, it's like this weird, you can't stop looking at it.
It's gross, but it's also really funny.
The thing is that like none of these in Iran are like chains that have the same ubiquity as they do in the United States.
Of course.
Like,
fair enough.
There's probably 10 different like KFC knockoffs, and there's like one or two of each of them, so like it's got to be very local dependent and stuff.
Are
like,
there more KFC knockoffs than McDonald's or Burger King style knockoffs?
I think KFC wins. I think KFC wins because for whatever reason, like I think that just like this is me taking a wild guess, but I guess that like I'm going to assume that hamburgers are like more popular internationally than fried chicken, at least like Southern American fried chicken. That's like the impression I get in Iran too, is like not every, hamburger stand is like a knockoff American fast food. Like some of them are just like burger,
Yeah.
They're just like a place. But you're like, for some reason, like KFC must have been the first fried chicken to like infiltrate Iran, because that is just like I've only ever seen KFC and like Iranian fried chicken being like KFC knockoffs. And I think KFC is like, dude, even like my mom is like kind of a health nut, right? And she's like the type of, like wealthy liberal to like brag about not ever going to get fast food. Like one of those people. And like I've like seen her eat KFC and like that she like got herself, and I was like, what are you doing? And she's just like, this is my guilty pleasure. And I
in
had
America
no idea.
or in Iran?
This is in America.
Okay.
Like this is just my assumption, is that like something about fried chicken like must have taken hold. I can't think of like any like Persian food that I've had that's deep fried. So maybe it's just the fact that they deep fried something that they're like, oh my God, I didn't know you could do this. Like I can't give you, a fast food tier list, but I can give you a condiment tier list, and ketchup like blows everything else the fuck out of the water. Like I feel like in my personal life, the older I get, the less ketchup I consume. Like no disrespect to anybody, but like,
absolutely.
But like when people eat ketchup with eggs, part of me I don't outwardly judge, but I get upset inside a little bit.
Yeah.
And like
I've gotten so much more into mayo as I've gotten older, which is like such a white a white American thing.
Yeah,
When I was a
yeah.
kid, like I didn't like mayo, but like as I've gotten older, it's like mayo is delicious. It's the best for fries, for tots. Like it's not even just mayo. I think that's undersell. I think that's a big reason why mayo gets a lot of hate is because when you say mayo, people just think of normal mayo. Whereas
Right.
in my eyes, mayo refers to like aioli and
Yeah.
like any sort of mayo plus ingredient. Because like you get a spicy aioli, you get a garlic aioli, like that's delicious. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
if it's on fries, tots, a sandwich, whatever. Like
Yeah, just
I'm
put
more
literally
excited to
anything
eat
in
that sandwich than I am if it didn't have some sort of spread like that.
This like food item, like to me, I thought like came across to me as like a crime against humanity, but I saw like tons of people. Like my uncle used to take me to this like public swimming pool in Iran that was like, again, like a lot of these things like public pool, fast food restaurants. Like when we think of fast food, we don't think of like, we think of it as like lowbrow kind of. Like we all deep
sure.
down, we know we like fast food. We know we all fuck with it, but like you wouldn't take a girl there on a date, you know, like a first date or whatever, or a second date.
You
even.
say that? I've got a friend who took someone to Taco Bell on a first date.
Okay.
And they dated for like years after that. And,
I mean-
like really normal, well-adjusted dude, and was just like, "Yeah, I just wanted to go to Taco Bell."
Right,
I
but
was
just
like,
the
okay.
fact that you're telling me this as a story right now, kind
Yeah,
of indicates
fair
that
enough.
It's not
Fair
normal.
enough. It was definitely brought up as like I did this and it was unique. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It wasn't
yeah,
like
yeah.
oh I do this all the time. It was like oh I did this
Right.
once and like maybe I shouldn't have type of thing. Fair enough.
yeah, as like a funny story type thing. But like, you know, it's like these places are like, I asked my cousin specifically, like, do you see it as like, you know, I feel like Americans don't like to like admit that they're so unhealthy, or it's like seen as like cheap, and you know, we are also a very like conspicuous consumption culture, and so we'd rather like flash that we're going to Nobu than flash that we're going to like, you know, In-N-Out. But like people do love to post In-N-Out, but flash that we're going to like fucking McDonald's or whatever. But like
Yeah,
people
sure.
think that shit is cool in Iran anyway. I saw like at this public pool, like what seemed like the most popular concession stand item was like nachos with like, rather than nacho cheese, it was like a white
Oh,
cheese.
don't
it was,
say it.
It was like a white.
I
like
thought you were
a-
gonna say ketchup. I thought you were gonna say nachos, but instead of cheese, it was ketchup.
Yeah, no, there's I was trying to say there's a weird cheese, but that's what I was getting to, is that they put a ton of ketchup on it. Like they don't use salsa, they don't use any of that shit. It's like no jalapenos, it's just ketchup. And it was like I was like, what the fuck
man.
is happening? I was a little kid. Even back then, I was like, no, fuck, what is this?
No,
And
don't
everybody
do
was
this.
eating it, and just like people put a ton of ketchup on. I'm struggling to think of like better examples, but I feel like ketchup with like bread was a thing even sometimes. Like
Sure.
like
Well,
just-
when you said ketchup being popular, like my first thought was going to something like shakshuka, which is Moroccan, but like just like the idea of like a tomato heavy, like saucy kind of thing. And it was like, okay, like maybe I could see how that extends. Putting it on nachos is crazy.
Yeah. I mean,
I
maybe
can't
it's-
imagine
I think it's
ketchup
the-
with nachos.
Persian's like cuisine is like really heavy on sour stuff, so I can see
Okay.
that like, and also I think Middle Eastern cuisine in general big on tomatoes. So I feel like tomatoes
Yeah.
plus sour stuff and sugar, that's probably amazing to people, you know?
Yeah, fair enough. Fair
Yeah.
enough. That's crazy though. Okay, so what overall you've been to KFC?
Yeah.
Where else have you been?
I've only been to like, I couldn't, you know, to like give you a picture of like what stuff looks like when I'm going to Iran. It's normally, my mom is one of 10 children, and you know, whenever we go there, it's not just like my nuclear family. It's like my mom and like one or two at least of her like siblings who live in the States now bring like their nuclear families too. So we'll be in a house with like 30, 40 people, like maybe not 40, 20 to 30 people, like legitimately 20 to 30 people, like staying in that house for like the 2 weeks that we're there. And it's just chaos, and there's a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of like, we got to go to like this person's house to pay respects and that person's house and have dinner there. And then, so like, I do not get to hit
Not a
up
lot
with-
of time for KFC.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not,
yeah.
I don't have a driver's license in Iran. I can't just go wherever I want.
Sure.
And the last time I was in Iran, like, you know, another thing is that like, at least explicitly, alcohol is not legal. So you can't just open a club, right? Like people definitely still drink in Iran, but it's like at private residences with only people that they know are cool. So, you know, you don't like, if you take away like bars as a place to hang, like the next biggest thing that like supersedes that is cafes. So that's where I went to with like my family out a lot, was like private cafes where they definitely served like American style food and then also Persian style food. Like every one of these cafes, like I'm thinking of these specifically, like my cousin opened one in Shiraz, like after he like went to college in London and then moved back and then like took what he knew about like London cafes and opened one in Iran. And like it's, you know, like tea and coffee and ice cream and stuff, but also like meals and shit. And like they'll have like board games and stuff like that, like typical stuff. But that was more of the scene. Like it did seem like people don't go to fast food places to hang. They go to fast food places to like eat and then fucking leave and do it fast, which is like, I know that sounds obvious, but like when I was in high school, my friends and I would go to a fast food place to like,
I was gonna say, like, for me, that is the like American fast food experience, is that it's like, okay, it's 12, like 30, like we're leaving a party in high school. I'm DDing for my friends, and you know, 4 of them are in the back seat of my car. And, like one person's like about to pass out, so like we need to go stop somewhere with a bathroom, and it's like the only thing open is McDonald's. And then you go to the McDonald's and you see all these people from other parties that have all made the pilgrimage to go to McDonald's. I live next to a place in Seattle called Dick's. Dick's is super popular. Like even in the last like 5 years, there was a picture of Bill Gates going to get Dick's, and he was just waiting in line for Dick's. Okay. So Dick's at like 12:30 is the busiest place in Seattle. Like you can just get lines of like 80 people all drunk, just like yelling, hanging out, having fun, like sitting down with their friends, like doing whatever. And it's like, that to me is like the American fast food experience. Like I know that there are plenty of people that like rely on fast food as like a way that they're able to get cheap food, right? Like it is absolutely that like fast food for some people, like, and like that's what I think when we were talking earlier about like low class stuff. It's like, I think it's more that like people look down on people that need fast food as some of their only ways to actually subsist. Right. But what people sensationalize and like really what ends up permeating into other places like Iran is this like idea of going to fast food, like, and hanging out with everyone and like, you know, that kind of experience. And so it's funny that you're like, oh, they don't really like hang out there. It's more of like a food experience. Right. I think it's probably more that like, you know, they're going there as like, oh, this is novel. We get to do this like meal. Like this is a treat. But in reality, for like, I think a lot of kids in America, like what the experience would be is like just hanging out with your friends somewhere that is a place you can kind of just like be silly, be loud, like do whatever. I've got a like very strong memory of just like in high school going to McDonald's because it was the only place open in a town that I used to live in. And so I hadn't lived in that town, but I went to school in that town, but I went to the private school. And I left, you know, a private school party to go to the McDonald's with my friends. And I saw a kid who I used to live next to growing up. And I hadn't seen him for like 12 years. And I look in the line and I'm looking at this kid and I'm like, this person looks so familiar. And I can't for the life of me figure out who it is. It's senior year of high school. So like I'm getting ready to go off to college. So is this person. And I like finally I'm like, what's your name? Just like walk up to him and he's like, Liam. And I was just like, dude, no way. Like we used to live next to each other on like this road. Like, and we started talking again. And it was like, we spent like 30 minutes of like my friends, like meeting his friends, me talking to my friend. Like it was such a fun experience just to be like, oh, this is such like a good time in American fast food restaurants. Like we all got our burgers. We drove to someone's house, like passed out on the, you know, on the sofas, woke up the next day, drove home. And it's just like, I don't know. That's the fast food experience that I like definitely hold on to. And so I think it would be great if that's the same experience that they're basically getting in Iran. But yeah.
My perception is that like, you know, I grew up in like a pretty like wealthy area, and I would say my family was, you know, like very, very comfortable, but not like wealthy. Like I grew up in Orange County, and so my family was not Orange County wealthy, and there was not like, I had this like overwhelming feeling that like there's not a lot of places you can go hang out at for a long time that's not designed to like suck money out of you as fast as possible.
Sure.
You know, and like I feel like that's just kind of broadly true in America when you're talking about like, yeah, you can go hang out in a park, but when you're talking like, you know, like go to a bar, go to like a hookah lounge or whatever, like everything is like super overpriced and expensive, and it's just like a lot
also
more.
When you're a kid, you like those aren't things that you can like do as a kid,
right? Yeah. So, like when you're like, I feel like American teenagers and fast food are like a perfect match because like you can just go there and like buy like, you know, like a $4 In-N-Out.
You can get a milkshake, like you can get a burger, you can get a shake, you can split one thing of fries with all your friends and just sit there and chat for an hour. Yeah,
there are days when I was in high school, when I was like a high school aged kid, where I went to In-N-Out like twice a day and I ate there twice a day just because like I wanted to join like friends of different groups of friends of mine who are hanging out at different times, you know. And so like I feel like that's just, you know, in Iran, like you can go to somebody's house and like they'll have you over for tea and you'll just kick it for 2 hours, or like you can go to like a cafe and like camp out there for like 3 hours and like talk, and people do that and stuff. It's like the American mythology that people have about Spain of like, oh, you can just like siesta and like chill, and it's like I feel like that is maybe partially true, that like, you know, other cultures don't have the kind of like the like lingering work expectation in their like white collar workforce that you must be like grinding all the time type shit. Yeah. So maybe that's a part of it too. And like, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of like it's a different thing. It's like, you know, going to fast food in America is not like rebellious at all. You know, it's like, it's normal. It's a very mainstream, like kind of like, what's the word? There's like a word on TikTok that Gary keeps telling me, my girlfriend keeps telling me, that's like, it's like Fuji or something. It's like it means like really like mainstream.
Oh yeah. Chugi.
It sounds like it's basically just basic. It's just another word for basic, I guess.
I heard chuggy as a way to describe like millennial fashion. Like chuggy was described to me as like wearing like a North Face vest, leggings and Uggs. It was like really poignant as like a way to describe like millennial, like slightly basic, like stereotypes basically.
Okay, then forget I said it to describe fast food. Just like, fast food, basic. and there it's not, and there it's like cool, and it's like, you know, I almost like sense like a tension between like wanting to have like local pride and like wanting to like eschew the like, you know, sort of like, you can see, I mean, you know, the United States did not like colonize Iran or anything like that, but there's like, you know, there's definitely like open hostility, right? And there has been for a long time, and the United States has had like an undue hand in Iran's political history, I would argue. And so to kind of resist against that massive cultural force, I can only imagine would be super satisfying. And at the same time, it's like you kind of want it. It's like, it is rebellion to, you know, instead of saying death to America, you're like, I want some like, I'm
gonna knock off your fried chicken.
Yeah. I mean, Persians aren't saying death to America all over the place. That's not the vibe either.
Yes,
not to
absolutely.
misrepresent my country or anything like that. But I don't know. I think like for me too, I think like to bring my own kind of like personal thoughts into it, it is the thing that kind of gets me about it, and the reason why I still think about it and still talk about it like years after I've last been to like an Iranian KFC is like, you know, I have that, I'm sure a lot of people who are like of two different like racial ethnic backgrounds or whatever, like they kind of don't feel like they're really a part of like that race, you know? Like I remember like when I was a little kid, I probably didn't understand like why this like hurt my mom's feelings so much, but I would tell her like, I don't think of myself as like Iranian. I think of myself as like Southern Californian. Like I grew up in Southern California. I barely speak Farsi. I have at this point in my life now probably like more not Persian friends than Persian. Like, you know, like I just culturally identify with like American in like 2022 way more than an Iranian, right? And it's just kind of like I almost have like the survivor's guilt of like, you know, I mean, Iran is not a hellhole, I don't think, and there's plenty of like beautiful people there, and life in there is like, there's a lot of good, but you know, a lot of my like, I'd like to be honest, like a lot of my family members who are there, like the last time I was there, every single one of them that was under the age of 30 was like trying to get out. They're like hoping to get out.
Yeah,
they're just like, there's not a lot of good economic opportunities. Like there's
just more opportunity elsewhere. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the people who like have resigned to stay, who like had once wanted to leave, had been like pretty defeated. Like I've had family members like try to go to the US and they can't go there, so they go to the UK, and they can't go there, so they go to like Hungary, or like they just go down the list of like European countries and like try to leave. And
Yeah, sure.
so it is kind of weird for me to like, you know, like visit there as like a, you know, like pretty privileged 20-something-year-old American, and like it's just I see that they're like longing for like KFC and shit.
Sure.
It doesn't sit right with me sometimes, and it doesn't kind of like,
it makes you aware of your position a little bit more.
right. Yeah. And there's a lot of times where, you know, when I'm like, I don't mean to make this sound like a sob story or anything. Like my parents, like my mom, like worked hard to like give me a good life here, and I'm very happy living in the United States. And like I have put time and effort into like learning how to be closer to my culture, and like I've been taking like Farsi classes recently and stuff like that. But like, you know, just the kind of like, you feel like you're pretending when you're not really a part of the culture.
I think that what you're saying happens with, I think, a lot of people that grow up with either like mixed backgrounds or are immigrant backgrounds, where they don't necessarily feel like they're American because of Americans being assholes and, you know, ostracizing them for their differences. And they don't necessarily feel like they fit in with their culture because they can't speak it, or people laugh at them when they do speak it. You know what I mean? There's a lot of cases of stuff like that.
I feel like I'm cosplaying as like an Iranian person when I like go there and like,
yeah,
you know, fucking read Hafez and shit, and like they're cosplaying as Americans when they go to like Mash Donald's and Boof Burger and stuff.
Mash Donald's. Mash Donald's. That's such a good one. Well, Kaevon, we're at about an hour. We've been going on. Any other things you want to say about Iranian fast food?
You know, I don't know. Not really. Like, just kind of, it's cool how people's like curiosity about each other's cultures kind of supersede like geography, political divides, like a lot of this stuff. It is like a blessing that we have the internet to like discover this kind of stuff about, like, you know, like, I mean, if this was 1980 right now, I would have seen like one KFC in Iran and just like thought about it for the rest of my life, and like never had a way to look up anything more about it. So I'm kind of like grateful for, you know, I'm grateful for this opportunity to just tell this weird story to people. Like,
yeah, absolutely. No, it's been really awesome to hear about it. So with that in mind, let's plug some of your stuff. So you're DJ Burrito Boy now. Tell the people about that.
Yeah, I am I understand the weirdness of me talking about Iranian food for like an hour and then saying, "Oh, by the way, I make music as DJ Burrito
By the way,
Boy."
I make house mixes where I cook burritos during the mix.
Yeah,
but no, shout out your channels.
Yeah. You can find me on the DJ Burrito Boy name is like a story for another day, but it's like comes from an inside joke type thing. But anyway, I make house music, and I DJ, and so you can find me on TikTok, YouTube, Bandcamp. My first single on Spotify is dropping. Sad I don't know when you're gonna post this, but it's on February 25th. So, you know, next week or
Thanks
yesterday.
for putting some time pressure on it. Now I got to get it out. But no, it'll be out soon. I'll start editing it soonish.
Yeah. Spotify is forever, so you know you can.
Yeah.
They'll still
is it
be
just
able
DJ
to find
Burrito
it.
Boy on everything?
Yeah, it's just DJ Burrito Boy. Like nothing weird going on with the spacing or the capitalization or whatever. So yeah.
What you expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. No, Kaevon, it was a pleasure to chat. I always really enjoyed talking with you in general, but it really means a lot that you are my first guest on the Seth Loves to Talk To show. So I'm looking forward to future episodes, and I'm glad that we started with this one.
Sweet. Thanks for the opportunity,
Absolutely.
Seth.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye.